Hey everyone, happy Friday. Switch OBS. Hello. Admit all. Turn off waiting room. Go. How's everyone doing today? Happy Friday. The time just seems to go and go and go. It's November. How is it November? It's crazy.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, John. Hubert, Tyler, and Ray. Oh, and Isaias. Nice of him to show up.
I'm 70 years old. How did that happen?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Morning.
That's funny.
Hello,
And you would think time would slow down as you age, but it seems to speed up.
everybody.
Hey, everyone. So who's got something to work on?
Good morning.
Morning.
I have a quick question, I think. I know
Yeah,
that may
let's
not
go.
be a quick question, but when we met last time, you had mentioned that you never use the sleep command. You don't like using that. And I use it throughout my scripts. I'm wondering what you do instead of sleep when you have to slow down a script.
Let me clarify something. It's not that we don't use sleeps. It's just that we don't use it with a fixed value, because a lot of times people just put like sleep 1000 and then it has to sleep that amount of time.
Right.
What we usually do is have a condition that while that condition is not met, I sleep. But as soon as it's met, it stops sleeping. So it is kind of like, depending on how long that condition takes to be met, I am just sleeping. So just, it's not that we don't use the sleep. It's just that it's not just a random number, because that number might change depending. And actually, we just had this with another client, that his computer was really slow because he was having some issues with his computer.
Right.
So the script was working just fine on my end. But when we put it in his computer, the script was failing. And then we had to put a sleep. But I cannot just simply say sleep 5000, because at some points his computer was faster, and at other points the computer was slower. So that was we're just having
Let me chime in real quickly.
Question.
I think 2 weeks ago, Isaias and I had not a disagreement, but we were coming at it from different points of view when we were talking about this. And I was saying, look, when you're first developing a script, you might throw in a 5,000 second sleep just to see if that's the problem, right? Because it's so quick and easy. Now, when you wouldn't actually keep that, you wouldn't use it and deploy it or use it, right? That's where you would say, okay, now let me rethink. You've identified the problem. Oh, I need to come up with a better way, that actually will, look at it in a certain way to take into account, is something available, is a thing ready or whatever, right? Like, which is kind of funny, because even in that example we wrote for Robert, the sleep, you're like, I'm not going to use the sleep. And then the first thing you do is write sleep. And you're like, well, it's actually a while sleep, but it was like for 10 milliseconds. I forget. It was a really, but it was a while loop checking to see something.
Which is interesting, because, and that is part of what I was trying to kind of clarify to you, Tom. I was thinking it's not a sleep in the sense of a random piece of time, 1000, it is still using the sleep command, but it's not the same. In my mind, it's not the same. And I just told him, no, I'm not going to use the sleep now. And then he sees me typing sleep, and then he was like, aha, gotcha. And I'm like, not exactly. One thing though, that I do want to point out, if you go this route, say, for example, and this is exactly what I was doing in that particular thing. I said, while there was a variable that I was waiting for, not that variable, that means I'm just sleeping or waiting for it. I had a command, I had a function that was supposed to return that. So I was calling the function over and over again until that had a value. So I was just making sure that I get a value, because I knew I was going to get it. It was just a timing issue. Then I do the sleep here 10, which is what Joe was mentioning. So I'm making a very short sleep. 10 milliseconds is really fast.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful with this, because as everybody knows, an infinite loop is never good. So you always have to put, if you're doing this type of things, you have to probably do, if a index more than, for example, and I calculate, okay, 100, so 100 times 10 would be 1000, right? So 1000 is 1 second. So I say, well, if a index is more than 100, so I mean, if more than 1 second has passed, then go ahead and break out of the loop or throw an error or do something. Don't just stay there looping, you know? So every time you do this type of things with a while loop or a loop, whatever type of loop in which you're sleeping only, make sure you put a condition to get out of the loop, because if not, it might happen that you stay in that loop and your program just hangs. So that is something to keep in mind.
So I use them because often in my scripts, I just realize that it's shoving stuff too fast through the keyboard buffer. And so I just slow it down, usually for about 200 milliseconds or 250 milliseconds. And it works fine. I'm wondering, I'm not sure what condition I would be setting there, you know, to make sure that if there's I did see there's, I think, a win weight command, and some people use win weight and I think that's more universally slowing everything down.
Well, my question to you would be, okay, so there are different methods of sending keystrokes. And you said you're sending the keystrokes to the buffer. Are you using send input, or are you using send play, or are you using the normal send event? Because there are different methods.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So that's the problem. My first attempt would be using send input mode, like the input mode or send input, which, independent of what you're doing, it puts it in memory of the buffer. And you can still type in other programs and it would still send the keystrokes without being interfered.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So my first guess would be, okay, try with send input. And that you can change two ways. You can either have a command that is send mode, and then you put comma input, and that changes all your sends. So if you don't want to go command by command and making the change, you just add this one line at the top of your script that says send mode input, and now all your sends are inputs by default. Or in some situations, you might want to keep the send events, and one of them you want to send it as an input, then you use the send input command, which is just one word, send input. And it works normally as the other send, but it's just so that's your first.
One other question, Tom, I'd say is, are you trying to send keystrokes, or are you sending words, if that makes sense, like text?
Yeah, no, I'm sending keystrokes.
Okay, right. Because I was going to say also, if it's a lot of text, that's where sending paste is you know,
better.
more efficient. But
okay. Yeah, no, I'm sending like a control A to drop down a menu and then pop to another menu point and select things that way. The other thing I do, which I don't like, it's not elegant, but I don't know a way around it, is I end up often using a click command to click at a particular location on the screen because I need to fill something in. But I don't know any other way to do it in some of the, like I'm working in Photoshop a lot, and I need to fill in the width of a selection that I'm going to do. I don't know any way to do that other than, but then of course it's dependent on my screen being, you know, full screen on a particular monitor.
well, let's because I wanted to interrupt you a bit earlier. You said you're sending control A, which also brings the point is, do you know you can send control keystrokes instead of the actual keystrokes?
Not sure what you mean.
So you can, is Ace, you want to show like a demo of using control to send instead of
Control send, you mean, right? Right. So there is another one that is called control send. So what I was talking about before was the send input, right? That's one way of sending stuff. But there's another way called control send, in which you specify sending keystrokes to a very specific control on your screen. So say, for example, Notepad. So I could open this up I would take a note of the control's name. So this is edit 1, right? So I would say, okay, send, and I first specify which control I'm going to send it to, the edit 1 control, what I'm going to send to, let's say, test, and the title of the program that I want to send it to, which might be, in a quick way, I would use HK EXE, right? So this is how I would put it. The interesting thing about this command is that it doesn't matter if Notepad is active or not. It doesn't matter if I'm typing anywhere. It would send this to that control independent of anything. And notice that it is typed there. So let me remove that. I just look, the edit control. So Notepad is not the active window, and I hit run. But when I bring it forward, it has the word in it because I sent text to that control, even if the control is not active, which might be a very reliable way of sending stuff. Yeah. And you can actually send clicks and stuff like that to it. You can click on stuff. Now, this breaks down when the program is not a Windows 32 API program, which is a custom program that has a lot of custom controls. That's where it will become funky because you cannot, for example, I cannot do that with VS Code because VS Code, when you look at it, let's talk at, let me open a new thing here. And if you look at it, a new file here, what you would see is that all the whole thing is just one big control called intermediate 3D window. So I cannot send text to wherever I want, like, for example, a specific control, because the whole thing is just one big control. When you have programs that are kind of like custom, like VS Code and stuff like that, you might find it a little bit harder to interact with it for the controls. But in general, one of the first things that Joe and I do when we're trying to kind of like, somebody tells us, hey, we want to automate a specific program, the first thing we try to do is verify if we could have access to controls individually so that we could, for example, this button here, I could just access it because if I use WinSpy, you will notice that this is button 11. So let me just do this. There it is, button 11. And I could just simply say, okay, button 11, click on, let's say, let me double check the name of the thing again. Yeah, I would do the AutoHotkey toolkit, right? So I can just use this and it would click on it. And I cannot do that because it would click over and over again because it's clicking the run command, right? But yes, you could definitely click on buttons, add text, remove text, change the caption, many interesting stuff by using control send instead of just using the send command. And the advantage is that the program does not have to be focused or active for this to work. It would actually do it even if it's on the background.
So if in, for example, in Photoshop, where there's a control at the top where it says, you know, width, and then you put in the width of like the rectangle that you want to draw.
Let me double check that because I do have Photoshop here.
Oh, good. Great.
And the interesting thing is that I think
all that money, it doesn't work.
No, the thing is that Photoshop has a lot of I know that the menu from Photoshop is a normal Win32 menu, but let's see how the controls, and this is the point. It doesn't simply just work with every single one.
So someone wrote me on the AutoHotkey forum, which I'm almost never there, but they sent me a private message. They're like, hey, I can't, I'm trying to, use WinSpy and get the text from this control and it doesn't work. I'm like, well, yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can programmatically connect to programs. He's like, well, which one can I use? I'm like, it depends on the program. I can't just tell you which one.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, well, which one should I look at? I'm like, again, you didn't tell me the program. Like, even then, I'm like, I don't know. You just got to play with it.
Right. That's the thing. We have to definitely, this menu up here, I'm definitely sure that's a Windows 32 menu. It's just in the wrong location, but I think if I go ahead and use Windows Spy on it, let me see what that is. So yeah, there you go, menu bar 1. But hold on.
Steal his signature, open a bank account.
You're dumb.
Let me see, hold on. The things that this thing
So
kind of like frozen.
random. Photoshop costs money, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah, look at GIMP.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
GIMP is a great open source tool.
Yeah,
Right.
it's free and pretty much does what
Basically everything you can do. Yeah. You know what? The reason why I never used GIMP, I tried it a long time ago, but it was just because of the hotkeys. The hotkeys never made sense to me. It was like, for whatever reason,
If we just had a way to remap hotkeys,
but at that time I didn't know, eh? And then I just simply said, no, I'm gonna stay with this one. It works as I'm used to, and I never looked back. But yeah, it is true. GIMP does exactly almost everything Photoshop does. It's just that Photoshop is older. That's all. Let me see. Oh, okay. So yeah, I hadn't paid it in a while.
I would
That's
say
what
the
happens.
UIA approach, which Tom,
Yeah.
because I know you're not an entry level person, right? Like you might be able to use it. It's a little complex, but it's very, very powerful, and you can peek inside things. A lot of Adobe products, we've tested a few,
Right.
and I know you can see.
So
stuff.
now here's my question, and this is where Windows Spy would come in handy. Is this thing a specific? There it is. That here tells me that it's a combo box. So I could access that, and I could control send that. Let me try, and this is.
Can you clarify something also, Zayas? Because correct me if I'm wrong here. When you're using the control send for that, again, you don't have to worry about the speed of things like he was having.
No, I wouldn't.
No.
I wouldn't have to. But here, you see these 3 buttons down here? The ones, they're a little small, but they are not viewed as individual things.
Right.
Notice that here, they all stay as PS View C1. This one change, but this one don't. So that's where I meant, this is, look at that.
Yeah.
This one says edit 2. Holy crap. Oh, this is edit 1. But let's try that. So let's try with the static ones, because these ones are easier to work with. This one here, copy. Let's just send 200 to, and this time it would be this guy here. What would happen there? You see? No, this must be like this. Oh, there you go. You see the 200 there?
Yeah.
You see, I changed it. That doesn't mean that it worked. Okay. I can change the text that it has. It doesn't mean that that Photoshop would just simply answer to that, because probably Photoshop does not have a 200% for opacity. Okay.
Right.
So just the fact that you can modify some values don't mean that it will really just work like that. But this proves what I said. You have access to programmatically change values, especially in a for example, this guy, for example. I could definitely think this one might be something that I could change and see. This edit 1, edit 2, edit 3, right? So I could definitely, and this is a float control. It's usually about the window that you're actually targeting. Usually that's the hardest part, being able to identify the window that you want to work with. But as you're seeing, I just copy paste what I find in here. So if I use that, let's just go ahead and make sure. Float in Photoshop, right? Let me just make this a variable title. The reason for that is because I'm going to use it 3 times. And for the edit 1, did we say edit 1 is the first one? So this is 1. Okay, so 1, I'm going to make it 2. I'm going to make it 7.5. And on 3, I would make it, I don't know, what was the third one? The resolution, 96. And then I just run this, and I would expect it to have changed 5. Notice that, oh, I know why, because this little guy here, this icon has both kind of like linked, I think. Let me double check what it does. Let me put it here.
Yeah, it locks them together.
Right. There it is. You see how they change?
Yeah.
Right. So again, you do have ways to do that. And at that point, when I hit run here, Photoshop is not active. So it really, I do not have Photoshop active, and I could be doing something else, and I hit that button and it would just definitely do that every single time.
Resolution, the value is added, not replacing the.
Right. It is
the
interesting.
content.
It is actually
Maybe
just.
you have to send empty at before or something like that.
Oh,
No, I'm not really sure how is that working, but yeah.
Then Control A first, and then
Right. Oh, so you could do that. Control A. So called.
No, for the third one, for edit 3.
All of them are. Well, I think the 7 is also doing that.
Okay.
The 7 is also doing that.
Uh-huh.
But basically, at this point, there you go. So as you can, again, you could always, so long as you have access to the individual controls, it would be easier for you to programmatically send stuff to exactly the
absolutely. No, that's a
Right.
brilliant way to do it. Way
Right.
simpler.
and then you don't have to wait, you don't have to
doesn't have to be active. Yeah, it's awesome.
Right. Could you just in
care
Photoshop?
about the thing. Exactly. So I usually, sorry?
No, I was going to say in Photoshop, if you could just hit Control T. I just like to look at one control that's in there.
Control T. Let's go ahead and do that.
I
that-
probably have to have
Yeah, I need to have
an image open or file open or
oh,
something.
no, I just need to have something selected.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, Control T. Now at the top where it shows the Y and the W and
These guys here.
yeah,
Okay.
I want to, if I want to
Yeah.
change the width, which is the
Right.
W. So we
Let's
look at
double
this
check on
Y,
that.
and we look at that.
I have edit 72 for the Y. I
Yeah.
have the width and height to be, edit 75, 71, 70.
Got it. Perfect.
Right.
Oh, that's
and
huge.
let's see what happens there. So I have 72, and let's just use this title instead. Make sure you always, Photoshop itself, you would send the whole thing to the main window, and the main window has to understand what you meant.
Yeah.
So sometimes you want to be very specific. I want to send it to this dialogue in Photoshop, but usually just sending it to Photoshop itself, it would know what to do. Sometimes I'm very specific just to make sure that I get my correct answer, but you might play about that for a little bit.
Can you launch Simple Spy real quick and just show them that?
Yeah, definitely. Let me just 1 minute. So this was Y, this is 72 and 73. So 73. The order of it doesn't matter either. So let's say 300.
Yeah.
And let's just see what happens when I do that. Ooh, there you go. Just moved it. Because I'm moving the X and Y locations. So if I'm here,
exactly.
right. So if I'm here and I hit run, it just moves the thing to 200.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, it is not impossible for you to go ahead and, oh, I had a loop in there. It's not impossible for you to interact with stuff like that, easily. Now I'm looking at this. Notice that it's not doing what I think it should be doing with the Control A. Let me see.
You might need to send it separately and sleep in between.
No, actually, let me see something. Okay. Where is that location? Let me see online. I'm not seeing. Hold on. Where did it move? Huh. I don't know where to put it. Okay, so let's just delete it and bring it back. So there it is. And the location of it. This is the guy that I'm looking for. Yeah, so it says 600. So it's kind of like a very weird location, but when let's go ahead and open the simple spy. Is this the one that you mean?
I'm looking.
Yeah.
To not. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one is usually the same version. Well, it does something similar to what we're looking at, but then it has less information that you have to worry about, because the other Windows spy has a bunch of things that might make it a little bit harder for you to kind of like see what is going on. You have position and, text and stuff like that. But
I have a question about Windows.
sometimes we just need just the control here, which is.
But to clarify, because to me, so yeah, Maastricht and I built this tool, right? See how in my tool, it's called control, but in the Windows Spy, it's class NN. And that's just a lot of people that are new to AutoHotkey get very, very confused of like, hey, go get the control, but it's not called control, right?
Right.
So in my tool, I mislabeled it purposely just because I'm like, look, most people get confused. So that it is the class NN, but I call it control just because a lot of people that are new to this
Nice. That's great.
And as you noticed, everything that I'm doing with the control send here is just two parts, the control and the window title. That's what this gives you, the window title and the control, nothing else, nothing more.
But you highlight that as you say the control, but it's just a really thing that bothers me. It's the class NN that you feed
right,
it.
of course.
No, but it's then why not call it control? On the Windows spy.
Well, because, and for those who might want to know what is going on, the class is static. That is the class of that window, because it's a window. The class is a static class, and NN refers to the number. And sometimes you have, as you saw before, 72 edits. So it is the class edit, the number 72. That's the reason why it's called class NN, but we just refer to it as a control. This is just one control.
And when there are many controls,
why all of the text is in Mandarin.
I'm sorry?
All of the text under class NN.
This here.
Yeah,
oh, right.
All
the reason for that is because it is not in the same encoding. So my encoding here is not UTF-8. And this tool probably is trying to look at UTF-8 encoding characters, and it doesn't understand it, and it's saying, "Hell, it is checking on the memory in wrong locations
incorrectly,
right? And then it just says, "Hey, this is the Chinese character or whatever," but it's not. It's just that it is reading the memory incorrectly. It's not a bad thing. It's just an encoding issue. Whenever you see this kind of thing, especially with text, it's very likely that you are looking at an encoding issue.
Jean led a great webinar on encoding, by the way.
I would say it's like Mandarin. So it's like
yeah, it looks I would have something to say about the control numbers like static 17 or edit 72. When there are many controls in the dialog box, when you install a new version of the software, it's likely that this number will change. Because if they add a checkbox before, these numbers are not controlled by the developer, they are controlled by Windows, adding this number at every new control that is added to the interface. So in the numbers are in the order they are programmed, if you will, they are coded in. So it could be that edit 72 will become edit 75 in the next release, because there will be a few other edit control added to the interface. So just to know that when you run a new, maybe sometimes just a small update of your software, you would have to review your macro just to make sure that everything works as expected.
Right.
I just created an index system, and then when something would shift, I could change one value And, usually it was just easier for me to control, but
Right. So notice that here it says edit 1 here, and the other one is edit 2. It's because, as John just mentioned, the order in which they're created, this is the first one, this is the second one. As soon as you create something, another edit control, and this is something interesting, it is not any button. So for example, if I add a button here, it would not
It has to be
change
the same class.
So if I add this guy now with a button in between, the class would stay exactly the same. This is number 1, and this will still be number 2. But if I add an additional, let me just label this second.
it's just like using tags on web scraping, right?
Right. So now if I add a new edit control here, that one would change the class of this one here. So if I go ahead and run this and try it again, the one that said second, which was second before, now is class edit 3, which is GUI, might change the control number here, the control ID. So you have to account for that when you're making macros. That's the reason why we try to go by the handle sometimes, and other ways of getting that, like Joe said, like the index number of it. But changes on the GUI might change where they're located, and that's where this thing might change. It's very unlikely that GUIs change that often,
No.
but they do. So you have to know that they might break your script, and it's just because they added a new button, for example.
And Brian asked about the easiest way to declare a global array and make an array global. I was trying to follow up and say, like, if you're using it inside a function, or if you're trying to return stuff, both of them, you can pass it as a parameter, right? Which is what I typically do instead of making it global. Or when you want to return a lot of data from a function, that's when I use an array or an object. But sorry, Brian, did you try to say something? I saw you get highlighted. I assume maybe you were.
Yeah, I think he tried. His your microphone is not. It's not working.
It's not right. Yeah.
Your microphone. Right. One thing is that having a variable made global. Actually, I just had an issue. Joe, I didn't mention this to you yesterday when I was working with
Robert stuff.
One of our clients' script, right? It was working just fine, and then just from the sudden, a variable which was supposed to be constant, so it was just a number. I have sometimes variables that contain a number for me to identify stuff, and I don't change them. I just use them as a value, and just from the sudden, the thing which was a 4 now is a 1, and I'm like, what the heck? Why? Because I never set that value. Well, the problem was that variable was a global variable. I made it super global. So even inside functions, I could, so as I'm used to a function being local, any variable that I have in there, I could name it whatever, and it would not mess with global variables. What happened was that I had a variable with the same name, and I was modifying it, thinking that it was local, but I had made it super global. So every single time I was like, what the heck? Why is this not working? And then I was like, what?
Yesterday we didn't record, we should have recorded it because it was a really good discussion about V1 and V2 and scope, and how in V2 things are sort of global. Like you were explaining to me, they are, but if you create, let's say your variable is VAR and you have it in your main script, you can use it inside your function, but if you create a new variable inside your function called VAR, it actually creates a different one.
It's a very interesting topic. Later on, if nobody has any questions, I could go over a little bit on it. But let's see if anily else has anything that they're working with.
Answer for him though, just real quickly, of just declaring it global.
Well, that's the thing. So if let me just do this, and this is basically what we were touching on right now, is that you have a variable called test. This already is kind of like a global variable, but let's return there. If you have a function here, you cannot access that variable inside the function because it is functions are local by default. So if I do this, the message box would be blank. There's two ways of fixing this: is either making the global, making the function
Just to be
global.
clear, he wanted an array, not a variable.
It doesn't matter what it is. It could be an array. Yeah, exactly. So let's do test, and that would be var1. So one of the ways is either making the function global. So anything inside the function would be a global variable. I don't recommend that. But as soon as you do that, now you see that I could access the variable. Second is making that variable global inside the function. That's a little bit better. That means you're definitely saying that variable is global. That works. But other variables like var2, message box var2 would not be global. So let's have var2 up here. That one would be empty because it's not a global variable. So I just specified one of them is global, but the other one is local, right? That's another way. This is my recommended way of doing it if you're going to do it. And the third way, which is the one that I had issues with, is what is called making a global, making a variable super global. In V1, if you're in the global scope and you make a variable global, that variable is global even inside functions. So you do this and you can access it even if the function is local. And let's do this. So let's just check right now, message box var2, and I have another global variable. So the first one is super global, but the second one is not. That's the difference between them. The first one, I could access it inside a function, but the second one, I cannot access it unless I make my function global, or if I make my variable global. That's the only way that I could access it. So, and with this one, you have to be very careful, because then your naming conventions must be very clear about what is going on, because that's what happened to me. My experience, what I was just mentioning, is that I had an error variable that was equal to 5. And actually, at that point, I had the variable extension, which was a very bad name, which is what I'm saying. You have to have a very nice name. I had the word extension as a variable, and I made it super global. What happened was that inside my code, I was just saying, for other reasons, I was just thinking, oh, this function 2 will get an extension. That's what it's going to return. It's going to return an extension information. And as soon as I did that extension, as soon as I did that, that function 2 was returning a 1. And it was actually replacing my variable. And now it was not a 5, it was a 1 now. And I was like, why? And I didn't know why. Here, so here is easy to see the issue because it's a very small code. But when you have many functions and the functions are big, you might not even notice when you're doing this just because it's super global. So be careful with that.
When
a
you
good
make
practice is to use a prefix for your global variables. So I prefix my variable name with G underscore, for example.
Yeah, you're incorrect. We have a better.
We have a better way. Yeah, exactly.
Gotta see our new approach.
Yeah. So this is
Gotta show it VS Code though.
right. That's what I'm doing right. So
we have a
right
video
now,
coming out here. Some touch on this thing that Elias had realized, and then we just took it a little extreme.
Yeah, we took it to the extremes, but in general, you can do this and say 5, and now what happens is that let's make it like this, global. And what happens is that for, whoever thought that was a good idea, you can have non-ASCII characters in your variable names.
Yeah, it's Unicode. There are Unicode characters.
Right. And then if you run this, it would definitely work if I call the function, by the way. But if you do that, you should get, it works. So you can have icons in your names, any icon, and it would work just fine, right? So,
but in fact, they are characters.
Yeah, they are.
Good point, Sean. Yeah, in reality, right.
It's just one character, and AutoHotkey knows how to deal with them. The only thing is that I have never seen a language that allows you to have Unicode characters in the variable names.
Maybe
They
because
allow
of
you.
yeah, and not sure that site would display the Unicode character.
No, so unless I tell it to, it won't. So right here, it would just display some question marks. But if I set the encoding to scintilla to match, it usually
to Unicode
does.
16. Yeah,
Right, exactly. It should definitely.
So Isaiah, when you declare it global
Match and
within
show
the
me
function, what is the scope of that global variable then? If you
It's
declare
still global. It's still global. So that means that you can modify a global variable by mistake.
So what's the difference between declaring it in the function and a super global?
In my case, I would definitely say the reason why I would do it in the function is because then
We're in
you're
suspense.
explicitly stating probably my connection just dropped, right? So here's the thing. I would definitely always recommend you in V1 doing this, because at least you have something explicit on your function saying, hey, be careful, this is a global variable, right? If you don't do this, you don't know that var1 is a global variable, especially when you have a lot of code.
Got it. Okay,
And
so it's
any changes you make, you're not going to figure it out until later on, because AutoHotkey is not going to actually warn you about it.
got
so-
it. So
so
you
it
can
will not
understand
declare. It will not declare a new variable. It will just
It would
tell
actually
in
replace this one. Yeah.
the, yeah.
Yeah.
If you put global var2 in the function, will it replace var2 content, or will it just make var2 visible inside the function?
No, it will replace anything you have, any variable that is global. If I make it like this equals, check this out, new test. And now outside, so this is inside the function, right? Now outside of the function, I want to know what the value is. You will, and this is why I definitely do not use functions. Notice this. I try to avoid global variables as much as I can. Let me remove this. Notice, I declare test, show it, run a function, and then show the message box again. The first one says test, and the second one says new test.
Yeah,
so your function might overwrite information of a global variable by mistake.
But that's the same variable. See, if you put message box on line 11, it will show test.
So if I do this,
my point is that it does not declare a new variable. It's just make available a variable inside the function.
Right. So if I just remove this one here, what is going to happen is before changing it, it should say test.
Yeah.
Because it is, what I'm saying is this is a variable that is outside of my function. My problem with it is that you can modify it without restriction, and that's bad, right? So that's not a good thing, because you might make modifications on a global variable without knowing, and your script will behave weirdly, which was what was happening to me.
Another thing that is
a little bit different on that.
Another thing that is risky is to put the word global alone inside the function. It will make all the variable inside the function global, right? Which is not what you would expect normally from a function,
right?
So that's.
But at least if you put the word global, at least I see the function and I right away realize that it's global, right? It's not the same.
Yeah, but elsewhere, if you use var2 elsewhere, it will be also the global.
Right, but at least I'm careful because I saw it. Now check this out. Now, if you make something super global like this at the beginning of your code, now you're in your function and you don't realize that that one is not a local variable, because the function doesn't say that it's global. The function looks like a local function, but what happens is that this variable is special, and that is something that you have to be really careful about. Yeah. Because now you are modifying or accessing something that you know that it was global, and you can break stuff very easily, especially in complex.
if you put global in front of it inside the function, so you're making that explicitly clear that-
Exactly. At least you give me a chance of knowing, hey, be careful with this variable because it is global. At least I know.
And would you put it, if you use that same variable in another function, would you put global in front of it in that other function? Could you do
Yes.
that? Just so you're
Yes.
always reminding yourself.
Yeah. Well, you have to.
Yeah,
If it is not super global, you have to because they're not accessed by default.
got it. Okay, so
Right.
if I want
Now-
to use the same one in another
And
function.
another
I would say,
function, then I
yeah,
would have to also say it here too. But
okay.
if it is not, if it is actually a super global variable like that, then it doesn't matter where you are. All
Right.
functions access it, and any of them can change the value of it at any point, which is insane. that's
Yeah.
difficult. But yeah, it's just the scope of functions is local by default, and there's a reason for that. It's better. It's better to keep things kind of like compartmentalized.
That's what I was going to say, which I didn't address earlier, was generally speaking, we try not to create global variables, right? It's
Most of the times, right? We try to avoid them as much as we can. It avoids certain, for example, one of the issues with accessing the clipboard is that the clipboard is the most global variable that you can ever access because all programs have access to the same variable. Which means that if you're relying on the clipboard, might be that another program changes the clipboard before you do, and now you do not have what you were expecting. So it is a good thing to try to compartmentalize stuff in a way that you always know what you're working with and you're not changing something by mistake.
So then you'd pass you'd pass a parameter rather than use a global variable.
There you go. Yes, that's exactly how it's supposed to be. And instead of changing your parameter, you should return a value so that outside of the code, you can say, okay, now this is what the function returned, and I didn't touch the original value at any point.
so I think we have 15 minutes left. I think Jean was going to show us follow up on the Explorer.
Yeah. Let me share my screen on my Windows 11. So maybe as a recap for those who weren't there, but I review, and I think everybody was there last week. You know that the latest update of Windows 11 in Explorer, you now have tabs. And it's an issue if you have code written for Windows 7 or Windows 10 that handles the Explorer window. So there has been two solutions this week, not perfect, but at least working for now. The first one is on the forum. I posted the links to the Zoom chat here. So there's a thread, an old thread on the forum about how to change a folder in the current Windows Explorer instance. And at the end of the thread here, there's this code where there's some input from NTPA, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, that solved what we were working on last week regarding converting code from V2 to V1. So we did using ComObject. He did that. So I merged his code with what was already existing. And what it gives here is this code that changed a folder in the current tab. So if I run this code here and press Ctrl+1, and I open Explorer, so I have two tabs here, images and videos. So if I'm in images and I press Ctrl+1, it will change to the Windows folder, and
but not touch the other one. Perfect.
Not touch the other one. And before, for those who weren't there, it was always changing in the first tab. So regardless of the tab that was active. So what it's doing here, I won't go into the details. You could review it if you wish, going to the forum. But if it's it gets here the active tab, and this piece of code here will check if it is the active tab that is being in the loop. So there's a loop here that goes after every Explorer instances. And if there are 3 tabs in Explorer, it's considered here as 3 different items. So it will loop 3 times in this loop. And when it is not the active tab, it continues to the next instance until it finds one. And when it finds one, it uses the navigate method here to go to the path that was requested.
Perfect.
So the new stuff is here.
Yeah, and
These lines
specifically the COM object. So you're not using the COM call anymore, right?
No, that's what NTFI did.
Exactly.
And there was no reason to try to convert the whole
exactly this
function.
code here. Yeah.
Just yes, COM object query is doing the job here.
Right, exactly. And this DLL call is the COM call. This is the same. The only thing is that now you're doing it straight from the object. And still you're doing here, number 3 is the same COM call that you saw before. So again, it was making it a little bit more complex.
To try the other way.
Right, exactly. But in any case, this was doing the whole thing.
Yeah. The other thing is when you want to open a folder in a new tab of the current Explorer, if you use the existing code that you can find on the forum, it will always open a new instance. So it will make a new window instead of a new tab. So what I did, and it's not the perfect solution, but it works for now, and maybe someone else will find a better way to do that. So if I do Control-2 here, running this script, if I do Control-2, it will open the Windows folder inside a new tab.
All right.
But if you see, it first creates a new tab. It's quick, but you see for half a second maybe that there is
a very specific folder,
which is home in English. So I'll just reduce the number of tabs here,
right,
and make it something else. So Control-2, it creates something and then replace it. So that's because there's a hotkey which is Control-T that creates a new tab.
Right,
and then I navigate this folder to the folder that I want to have in my new tab.
That's awesome.
So that's I would say quick and dirty solution, which is here to send Control-T, sleep. I improve that elsewhere so that it and then navigate this tab to the folder. So maybe there's another method of the
the object must have the COM object must have a way to create a new window. Yes,
like there's navigate to. There are a few methods there, so maybe it exists or it will be added. I don't know. That will create a new tab or navigate in a new tab, something like that.
I would definitely assume so. Yes.
Yeah, but it's not known for now, at least on the forum.
Yeah.
But this works, at least I can, and I will use this in quick access pop-up.
Actually,
these are two features that are required in quick access pop-up, and it could be improved later if we find a better way to do that.
Yeah,
but I just like to use hotkeys because, excuse me, Isaac's last point is that I know that Control-T works in English. I know that it works in French because I'm using French, but I couldn't tell that in every language Control-T would do the same thing, because it happens in Windows in some localization that Control-T maybe is already used for something else, and they will use Control-N, or so it's never safe when you do something that you want to work in every localization of Windows to use hotkeys based on letters that are referring to a given language, T for tab, for example. Yeah,
because at that point you would have to have kind of like a check the language of the system and then have a letter for each language.
Yeah, and to know, I don't know in Arabic how they do Control-2, for example.
Yeah, but what I was going to say now is, and just tying in what we saw previously, maybe you can change send Control-T to Control-Send, to send it to the, so instead of using Control, so if you go up, instead of using send Control-T, it would be Control-Send.
Yeah, okay. I have to use the right.
Like
keyboard.
Control-Send.
Yeah.
And then a comma there, because the first thing would be the control, but we don't want the control. You can leave the Control-T, and the next one after the Control-T, comma, now the title of the window, which is, Windows Explorer, whatever the name of the window is.
Or the class or its title.
Right, or whatever the title is. I think you have the HK ID there, right? No, I saw.
And the class is something like cabinet or...
Yeah. In any
Checking
case,
that W class.
if you have the ID, you're
I have
set.
the ID, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't, then you don't need anything else. Just the ID is
Yeah.
the best, actually. But in general, this way
Yeah, I
you're sure that that is going to be sent to that window every single time. And this is interesting. You can omit the control, and then this control T is sent to the window itself. So
yeah.
it's
So what
not-
I'm doing just to make sure that this window is active is that I activate it here.
right.
Yeah. So maybe I could avoid this by using the control
Control
send.
C.
With, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Control
That would
send with
right.
with the AHK ID here.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's
good point.
basically a kind of like tying in when I would just go ahead and think about this way of doing stuff instead of you know, you would have to test it. You would have to see if that actually works, because some windows do not translate stuff automatically. So you have to be careful with that. But usually I start with that because it allows me to make sure that even if the window is not active, it would do whatever I told it to.
Yeah. So maybe this will work. Let's just
Yeah, we can try.
check it here. So here we have one. And so if I press Control 2 here,
It
it
should
doesn't work.
Do we have the AHK ID? Do you have the hand? Yeah, you should have the handle.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes from the oh no, the handle is empty at first. So I have to, yeah, okay. In this case, the handle is empty. I would have to pass the handle here.
No, this line 18 is the one that does it. Line 18 is the one that.
Yeah, but if I want this to be outside of the function, but
Oh,
yes,
right,
I could, yeah, I could just leave this line here.
For now, just to test it.
Yeah, for now, yeah.
Right. But
Okay.
it is still checking for the active window, which in this case you would change it to the name, the window cabinet thing. So it would get that window even if it is not active.
Yeah, for now it will work just if it is active. What I want to do is to, yeah. So let's put this
outside of the.
Yeah, I just want to put this in the clipboard, and I will use the value
In the clipboard.
Yeah, just for a second. Just
okay.
Just to get the value.
Oh, so you can get a how do I say, like
Control 2.
A fixed value now. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For example.
So like this, and can remove this. Okay, and now I get the value here. So I don't need to.
Yeah, exactly.
So if it works well, it should work even if the window is not active. So let's
but let's test it first with it active, and then we'll see.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I do not know how that works, and
no, it doesn't work. Maybe that's the control send that has something.
Okay, which is what I meant.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to take more time. We are out of time, but at least there are a working solution with the with what you can find on. And I posted the links on the Zoom chat if you want to.
I threw them into the YouTube chat as well.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, for sharing that. And also, I put the link to QAP in the YouTube chat. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think I saw an update the other day. You've already included some of this, right, in QAP to use the tabs?
I just at least removed the bug that was changing the tab in every tab, like what one of our users showed us 2 weeks ago. And it now changed the folder in the active tab, but using keystrokes, so a way I don't like. So it will be improved in the next release.
Which is a really good point of when you're, when you have code, you're developing it, you don't have to have your optimized solution. Version 1 is better than version none, right? Get it out there. Way. I also want to remind people, so tomorrow or the next day, we here in the US, we set our clocks back. So this call will be 1 hour later next week. It's still going to be the same time for me in the sense of on the clock time, right? But just FYI, so if you don't adjust your clocks right now, some countries do them. Like Jackie and I discovered they do theirs about 2 months later, a month and a half later or something.
Yeah.
It's really
I
weird.
think that in Canada we do that the same time now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before it was a different time, which was a mess.
Yeah.
Now it's the
Yeah,
same
it
time.
gets
Yeah.
confusing. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
you don't change your clock, right? Is that right?
No, we don't. And then it depends on the company. Some companies do
Wow.
make us, for example, call centers usually, as
Sure.
they work for Americans, they say, well, then you have to come at a different time. So yeah, it's just a mess. It's usually a mess.
So everyone, thank you. We got to run to the hero meeting. The URL's over my head if you're interested. There's a lot of heroes here. So, I mean, it's a lot of fun. We're learning a lot. And thanks everyone for being here. Have an amazing weekend and hope to see you next week.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.